Bring it on. Bring it on, Deza. So, just did a little bit of reading today of Darren Brown's Hippie. And I think he's made a few little errors there, or at least he's probably not, but because he's citing philosophers and I'm a fucking moron. But I'm just going to give it everything that I've got here. So I just got to a bit where he's talking about immortality, and a couple of philosophers, including Martin Nussbaum and some other person, say that it's bad because it would get boring and stuff. But I think there are some errors with the concept of infinity that they're using. So we'll see. So there are a few things. I've made some bullet points which I was just going to expand on, but I'll kind of expand on them later anyway, just in writing. Order matters. So I think the order in which events occur affects the possible outcomes of infinity. So we can have bigger and smaller infinities, obviously, and stuff like that. But for now, so I've talked about how order matters before. So like, if you can get two people, and you could, I know it's a bad example, but you could get them to watch 3 or 10 YouTube videos in certain orders, and the way they'll come away from those 10 videos will depend, like the views they will come out of it with might depend, well, probably will depend on the order in which they're watched. So, or if you spread those videos out across time more, so, watch one of them a year, and they each have certain political views, and they'll affect the way they go into the next one. Each video will affect the way they go into the next one. And then obviously the final outcome will be a different person. So you could have identical people, but depending on the order they interact with them. So if the first videos you come across are atheist ones, then the one you come across, and then later in the 10 videos in your life you come across some arguments for religion, then it's very unlikely. It's likely that you'll form your opinions on the first one and then apply those opinions to the later videos. So that's just how order matters in that case, but obviously I'm saying order matters in a more universal sense. So if the universe just underwent some kind of event that caused the heat death of the universe to happen more rapidly than expected, then that would matter for the lifetime of the universe. So if it happened right now, then that's obviously going to be a different infinity than the possible universe where it doesn't happen yet. So also with infinity, you're still limited by the parameters of what is of what is physically possible. So you can't, even with infinite time, you can't. Well, part of so what if the universe and space? What if space-time as a whole were to collapse in on itself, and so the concept of time ceased to exist? Right? You can't then have after that. You can't. Once that happens, you can't have all the other possibilities of infinite time afterwards, because there's no time for it to happen in. There are some fundamental laws of the universe which, given infinite time, it's often presumed that every imaginable possibility can happen, but you're not going to be able to get. You're not going to be able to have things that defy the laws of physics, like, I don't know, fucking. Just because you have infinite time, you're not going to get dragons that. That's not very. Not to do. That's more fantasy than physics, but you won't have. Non-quantum behaviour or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, another assumption that Darren seems to make, and these other philosophers that he's citing, is that for some reason, when you get immortality, your memory becomes immortal. He also says that he also recognises that it doesn't at some point, that you could just forget things. But he also uses memory, so you'd get bored because you've done it before. But what if you couldn't remember because it's infinite time? So you probably might not get bored. You could spend infinite time. So there are paradoxically opposed possibilities for the way immortality and infinite time could pan out. You could spend infinite time living what I say is the life worth living, so of the graph being above that line, or, because that's, you could say, you could spend infinity, so the entire length of time itself in that positive state of having life worth living, or you could live an entire infinite thing, infinitely long time below the line of life worth living. So, but you can't have both just because it's infinite time. You can't have mutually exclusive things occurring simultaneously. Some infinities form mutually exclusive possibilities. If someone spent infinity as the greatest pianist in existence, then it would be paradoxically impossible for you to be or have been the greatest pianist at any point. Yes, so if one of the infinite possibilities or infinite things that occurs throughout for the entire infinite time is that someone is the immortal best pianist in existence, then at no point, just because there's infinite time, at no point can you suddenly become the greatest pianist, because that would mean that they're mutually exclusive. Right? And that goes for more things than just that. It goes for an awful lot of things. So I think you need to be a bit more reserved about how many things can occur simultaneously and still be true. Also, the memory thing, I think the idea that you'd get bored is contingent upon you. Surely, you're using the argument that with infinite time, every infinite possibility has to happen. So, one of those possibilities is that you'd never get bored. But also, I don't know anyway. When faced with immortality, the life of the Buddhist might be advisable, but this does not mean it is true for a non-immortal life. It may be the case that to truly reap the benefits of the Buddhist way of life would require the investment of time greater than the typical lifespan. So I think it's probably the case that when you're immortal, some realizations would be, if you were immortal, some realizations that would be very beneficial would be one, egoism, all its sorts. So the graph of the area under the curve of the life worth living graph throughout time. The fact that your memory is not infinite. So, and what was he talking about? Relationships. Love wouldn't be eternal, but yeah, I don't see why it couldn't be. It just was. I just found it so uncompelling. Not really well, I don't think. But anyway, the way of the Buddhist would be to just live in the moment, and that moment shouldn't really be contingent upon. I mean, contingent on previous moments and a whole lot. You could do things over again and not necessarily get bored of them because of the memory thing. You just have to find a way to do that, Even in the case of infinite time, the universe still operates in the world of probabilities. Now, it may be the case that even the most absurd things have some unimaginably, God, I'm so fucking retarded, small probability. And so some would likely assume that given infinite time, they must occur. But what if those probabilities are contingent on other probabilities, or more importantly, the probability of other things not occurring? So it's kind of the thing I was talking about earlier with paradoxes. But no matter what possibility or probability you come up with for something, they can rely on other things happening. And you say, because it's infinite, I can picture it now, it's infinite time, therefore they all have to occur. But that can't be the case, because some obstruct other ones from being able to happen. Like I said, like the being the best pianist for infinite time, and yet someone else being a best pianist at some point in time. The universe collapsing now prevents certain things from. The pianist thing, saying that you'd get bored of it, and this also ties into the order mattering thing. With time, progress is made, so advances in technology and whatnot would mean that new possibilities might always be coming about, and advances in science and the understanding of the universe might also cause exponential possibilities to arise. And even with infinite time, it might not be possible to it might be possible to limit out, but then you combine it with the memory thing, it doesn't matter. So, and we also know that we change from moment to moment, so it's never really you throughout. It's just just bullshit, the whole thing. That I'm not buying it, Darren. Not buying it, mate. You fucked up, Des. A couple of other ones here. The only true unfortunate thing about my discovery that what I discovered is called egoism is that the only prominent supporter of egoism in recent times seems to be Ayn Rand. I'm not sure if she actually was, but I just saw something that said she was one. And from what I can tell, she seems to be a bit of a bitch. So obviously people will erroneously assume she was like that because of her egoism, and was an accurate representation of what it tells us about how to behave. When I would say she was a terrible example. Remember, symbiosis is the most powerful tool in the arsenal of goodness, and so by being an outright bitch, she limits her area under the curve of life worth livingness drastically. Yeah, I just don't think if she was an egoist, she was a fucking shit one. She got it wrong, mate. She didn't know how to do it because she seemed like a right fucking bitch. So the graph of life worth living, eudaimonia, happiness, blah blah blah, all those things across time and maximum in the area under the curve would actually look more like, I'm trying to describe it here. So the actual graph would be kind of very sporadic, and would have like a basal line that's just travelling very very close to the zero line. So you have, it's not just a right angle graph. It's like, well, not like a up and to the right axis graph. It's kind of an up, and then in the middle of the y-axis there's an x-axis. So you have zero, but you also have negative and positive. Bloody hell, I'm such an idiot. And the graph of your life follows the x-axis much more closely than you would expect. So you're basically always dancing on the verge of crossing over. You have massive peaks and troughs, like that are more like spikes that come out because moments of elation and sorrow are usually short-lived. But what we're trying to do really is bring the line that's the baseline that's kind of travelling throughout pretty steadily up just above the zero point, because that's when your life is likely to become, because the spikes are likely to have little impact on, unless in certain circumstances, but on the actual area under the curve. It's the constant time, the average, baseline thing, which is very close to crossing over, that you need to worry about. Peaks and troughs much more like huge spikes, signifying short-lived nature of intense emotion. As the baseline approaches zero, the magnitude and frequency of the spikes decreases. So as your baseline becomes less worth living on it in its own terms, the peaks and troughs of the spikes, so the spikes in emotion and well-being and all that, become less profound, and yeah, it's just that everything gets dulled. So there's that. Some other things I probably wanted to say about it, but I can't remember them right now. Oh, I was going to talk about the whole, I've tackled it before, so why would you ever sacrifice yourself from an ethically egoistic standpoint? And I've said, the momentary elation of carrying out that event might be good, might be enough to maximise the area under the curve, to get a good area under the curve, and the time. You're also got to consider your conscience afterwards, so it might, to have not done it would be worse for you, because it would bring your area under the curve into a negative point for the rest of your life, the rest of your time in existence. Also, you could just be wrong. It might actually just be a mistake. It's not nice to people. This is obviously what people use to try and disprove ethical egoism, that surely it must be right to sacrifice yourself in circumstances, but maybe it never is. It's a possibility. And also another one is that, well, this kind of ties into psychological egoism, is that it might be best for us and true of us to say that we believe we would. So when we're just talking about it now, I'm not actually about to jump on a grenade and sacrifice myself, but it might be best for me to actually say it and believe it, and I might actually believe it, that I would sacrifice myself in certain circumstances because that's best for me now, but it might not necessarily be best for me if that situation were to actually arise, and whether I realise that or not is irrelevant to whether it's real. Whether I realise that or not in the moment would be irrelevant, really. Okay, I think that'll do it. There are a couple of other things I've forgotten, but whatever, I'm done now. Bye.